on, everyone? This is your boy at Big Game James _36, and I'm here with Greg McGarity with the Tax Slayer Gator Bowls Drive to Selection presented by Toyota. Each week we go through the week of college football that was past and the future to talk about how it relates in relation to the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl, which is going to be played December 29th at 12 p.m. How you doing today, Greg?
Doing great, doing great.
It was a really good week. Each week is kind of like one up in itself. Something crazy happens. Parody, guys looking like they were the champions one week, then the next week looking like should they even won that game? But before we get into all of those things, let's talk about again what are the playing games that actually tie into? What are the tie-ins to the Gator Bowl? Which conference?
Right. Well, we're the Atlantic Coast, the ACC, and the SEC. So in the ACC, once the college football playoffs have been determined, and the ACC fulfills their spots in the Orange Bowl, then we're next up. And in the SEC, once the college football playoff has been established, then the Citrus Bowl would have a pick. And then we're in the group of 5 other bowls that get to really have the best matchups from the SEC against the ACC opponent. And there are a lot of factors that come into play, but certainly both conferences are going to be able to provide great teams for our game this year.
Well, early on in all of this, the ACC and the SEC have kind of provided some intrigue. Some teams that we thought that we probably wouldn't have a chance for, now it's kind of shaking up to be a little bit different. And on the ACC, some teams that we probably didn't think about are now in position. Going into the SEC first, we saw Georgia play Auburn. And now Georgia's probably not coming here.
Right.
Would be good for us, but I think they have a chance for college football playoff. But let's talk Georgia Auburn, that game, and is Auburn just a little bit better than what we thought, or is it just something? It was just one of those crazy games.
Well, Georgia's going to get the best shot from every team they play this year. So give Auburn credit; they had an unbelievable atmosphere. It's tough to play in that facility when they really get it going. And Coach Freeze certainly has the Tiger fans motivated. So, and you can't really turn the ball over in games like that to give the opponent a chance to feel like they're in the game. So Georgia did what they had to do in the last 3 minutes of the game and got the ball in the hands of a great tight end and able to get out of there with a 7-point win.
Yeah, definitely. Bowers is amazing. It was funny. The defensive coordinator for Auburn took to Twitter when people were like, I can't believe we didn't bracket or double cover them. He said, what game were you watching? We did. He's just that good. And Carson Beck is actually getting better each week. Jacksonville's own from about a manner in high school. Kirby brought up some good points. Like each week is a new experience for him because he's never been in that situation. And he's growing. I know they're used to playing up here, but again, as you said, each week everybody gets the top shot. A team that I actually thought, or a lot of people thought, would probably lose their first game, but could potentially run the table would be LSU. With Jaden Daniels, that offense, explosive. They played Ole Miss in what was damn near basketball on grass. What does that Ole Miss LSU game how does that shake up and how does that affect Jacksonville?
Well, it puts both in play here for our game potentially. And LSU's got a tough road to hoe. They've got a lot of tough games still to play. They have to go to Alabama, so they've got some difficult matchups still left. And Ole Miss, they've got some tough games. They have to go to Georgia to play. They've got a few tough games in between. So I think it keeps both of them in play. Unfortunately, I think it keeps them out of any national aspirations, but certainly keeps them in play for our game.
Yeah, not SEC West, again, as I always talk about, is the toughest conference in football, shaping up to be interesting as things go later on, especially a team that we thought probably was going to have a similar season to what they had last year with Texas A&M, how they came out flat, lost to the University of Miami. But now they're tied for the top of the SEC West going into a big game with Alabama.
No doubt about it. Even though Texas A&M is not ranked, I'm not sure what the spread is on that game, but A&M beat Alabama there a couple of years ago. So you're going to see a motivated Aggie team. It's the CBS game of the week at 3:30. So a lot of eyeballs will be watching that game, but it's going to really, really be interesting to see how that game develops.
Shifting over to the East, Florida, after they beat Tennessee, looked to be like, okay, maybe they're a lot better than what we thought. But then you saw Kentucky, who now Georgia and Kentucky are at the top of the SEC East. Kentucky just kicked their teeth in. And what does that do? Does now that make Florida a little bit more realistic to come here to Jacksonville? Or where do you think about Kentucky actually being in the SEC play?
Well, I think Kentucky and the job that Mark Stoops has done at Kentucky is amazing. I mean, they're a very physical team and always have been. That's been a trademark. So, it's been a trademark of Kirby Smart's teams too. So it's going to be a true rock'em sock'em game Saturday night in Athens. But certainly, Kentucky's been on the cusp of qualifying for Atlanta the last few years. But now they've got a great running back and their physical team. Florida, a big game for them. I think they'll handle Vandy this weekend. I think a huge game, pivotal game for them is going to be at South Carolina the week after. South Carolina's off this weekend, so they're going to be able to get healthy after that Tennessee loss. And a lot of things can happen, but the margin of error now is so slim for teams that have maybe 3 losses overall to really be bowl eligible. So it's a huge game for both teams next week.
Yeah, I never really thought about how winning certain games early, you got to do that just to be even bowl eligible. But definitely until I kind of got to talking to you each week, and now we're breaking down how to get into a bowl, but also the college football landscape in general. South Carolina, Florida, again, that person loses that, they may not.
It's a tough game.
Now they're trying to fight the 6, get the 6.
Right. Absolutely.
So we talked about the SEC. Moving over to the ACC, a big game. Doesn't really have any ACC implications per se, as Notre Dame is just ACC light when it comes to football. But Louisville is one of those teams right now that kind of snuck up on a lot of people. And Notre Dame did have a scare last week against Duke. What is that Louisville-Notre Dame game, what does that look like?
Well, a lot of momentum for the Cardinals. Because think about Notre Dame. They came off a really tough loss, Ohio State at home, then go to Duke and win just a pressure-packed game. This is the 3rd week in a row. They're going to have to be at their very best. And Louisville's proved that they can certainly move the ball, and Coach Brom's got them really, really playing well. So a lot of eyeballs on that game, and it's huge from a national implication as far as the New Year's Day 6 bowl games, because the winner of that is going to basically have a leg up on a lot of other teams in the ACC as far as qualifying for, if not the top 4, certainly being a New Year's Day 6 bowl game.
And with Notre Dame, with Coach Freeman, like you said, they had Ohio State. Now you got an undefeated. You had Duke, now, which was undefeated. Now you have an undefeated Louisville, and then after that, you're probably going to be playing an undefeated USC. So like that schedule is brutal right now. Miami, a team that's another undefeated team, is now opening up ACC play. Last week you brought up a really good point. They've got 8 straight conference opponents, which is very difficult. But they're starting off with Georgia Tech. What are your thoughts on that game in both of those teams?
Well, I think Bowling Green's upset of Georgia Tech is certainly going to reset things in Atlanta. So we'll know a lot about kind of the makeup of Georgia Tech this week to see how they compete against Miami. But Miami coming off an off week, certainly they've got a great quarterback, and they've got a lot of momentum building in that program. So we'll see how competitive Georgia Tech can be after that loss to Bowling Green.
Clemson getting things back on track, beat Syracuse, starting to move back in the right direction. Again, going back into conference play, playing Wake Forest. Clemson is one of those teams right now that, as you talked about earlier, 2 losses in conference has basically taken them out of the national championship, but also more than likely taking them out of conference. So do they need to keep winning to even be able to be eligible for the Gator Bowl or anything of that nature?
Absolutely. They need to keep winning. Duke, they're going to be without their quarterback for 2 or 3 weeks, so we'll see how that plays out. Duke's got a really good defense, so they probably can sustain that and see what happens. But you're right. Clemson more than likely will be in our mix unless they play their way up into the ACC championship game. But once you get a little momentum going, and they usually struggle a little bit at Syracuse in the Carrier Dome, but certainly they got the job done and certainly set Syracuse back a little bit. But I think that's kind of a trait that happened in Syracuse in the past. Start off strong, see how they do in ACC play. But so far they won 4 straight.
Syracuse has a tough wall to climb. They obviously lost to Clemson. This week they play North Carolina, and they can't get caught peeking ahead to Florida State.
Right.
What does this Syracuse need to do, or what does this game mean to Syracuse in terms of overall contention playing North Carolina?
Well, they need to win one of the two if they're going to have a chance to be in Charlotte. So, the neat thing about this is we'll be halfway through the season after this week. I mean, it's hard to believe. It just seems like it just started. So you're going to see some teams either work their way in or out, because you can kind of forecast to see who thought Missouri would be that good. I mean, Miami's on the way to really having a special year, and to really have those special years, you've got to beat somebody you're not supposed to beat.
Right.
And then you've got to win the games you're supposed to win. And when a mixture of those things don't happen, it just makes it difficult for you to make the highest advancement that you can in the bowl structure.
Florida State plays Virginia Tech to kind of round out the teams that are looking for national importance. So Florida State has to continue to win that so that they can maintain where they're in now. You got something cool on the board right now that people can't see, but we'll talk about it. But we have the college football playoff. There's only 2 teams that you kind of right now are seeing that from the 2 conferences that will basically eliminate them from the Gator Bowl. And that'll be FSU and Georgia if things continue to play out. Your New Year's Day, your New Year's Six bowl games. Talk about these teams that you have here and kind of what your thoughts are on that.
Right. Well, in contention right now, and this is just strictly our guesstimate here, is that North Carolina, Louisville, Miami, and Notre Dame are in contention for that Orange Bowl berth. Right. Unless FSU falls out of the top 4 and would fill that spot. So you keep them in there as far as irrelevant. They may drop down to what we call in the hunt for our game, or either they drop down to being out of contention. So a lot of teams in our mind have already worked their way out of contention just based on how they've done this year and really their opponent's strength. Who thought Missouri would be as strong as they are? Missouri's got a huge game this weekend. I mean, they're gonna all eyes are gonna be on that LSU Missouri game, and LSU coming off a really tough loss last weekend at Ole Miss. That's a game to watch, and it's a noontime start, I believe. So out in Missouri, it'll be 11 in the morning. So really be interesting to follow that game.
And it'll be a little cooler than it is down in Baton Rouge. So let's talk about the teams that are in the hunt, and just and then we'll go into some potential matchups. So you've got Syracuse, NC State, Clemson, and Duke on the ACC side, but there's a lot of teams on the SEC.
Right.
Why would it be like that? Just in terms of selecting.
Well, I think we've got Kentucky, Missouri, Florida, Tennessee, Auburn, Ole Miss, South Carolina, which can't play here this year, A&M, and LSU. And a couple of those teams may not be bowl eligible. Take, for instance, next week, the Florida-South Carolina game is huge from bowl eligibility, because there's very little margin of error since both schools have 3 losses. South Carolina's off this week. Florida plays Vandy, so you're going to see probably a South Carolina team that's going to be really motivated after not performing that well against Tennessee.
Gotcha. So moving over here to what our projections are. CBS has Miami versus Tennessee, which I think will be a good one. Athlon Sports, Louisville versus Ole Miss. 247, Clemson versus Texas A&M. College Football News, Miami, Ole Miss. That one hasn't changed. USA Today, Louisville, Ole Miss. Bretman Murphy, Miami versus Tennessee. ESPN, I think they had that last week. That was the Spurrier Bowl. But we see this Clemson, Texas A&M up there a couple of times. What would that matchup be like, and what would make that intriguing here for the Gator Bowl?
Well, if it's Texas A&M, hoping that they travel, because a lot of teams, they were in our game 2 years ago until they had some situation that caused them to pull out, and even at that time, their response was not that great as far as tickets sold. So, really, what's critical to us to make our budget work, and sustainability is having people at the game. So I'm sure Clemson would represent well. They're going to be with their team through thick and thin. A&M are teams that can't really drive here. They may make it tougher, but certainly that would be an intriguing game for TV, and the ratings would probably be off the chart.
Right. Dabo versus Jimbo. Kind of getting back to what it was back in the day. So a lot of intriguing things going on, a lot of cool stuff this week. Still good football games.
Yep.
Not as many as it was last week, but each week you never know. Because again, who would have thought Georgia, Auburn would have come down to what it came down to? So, and a lot of games. USC, Colorado out in the West ended up being a lot more exciting than what people thought it was going to be. But that's why we like college football. And that's why each and every week we come with the expert opinion of Greg McGarity and my humble opinion at Big Game James _36 with the Tax Layer Gator Bowl Drop to Selection presented by Toyota. We will see you guys next week.